You spend months tweaking your diet, tracking your sleep, and buying the right supplements, but that lingering fatigue or chronic pain refuses to clear. This frustration often stems from matching a specific intervention to a specific point of discomfort. If you're tired, you drink caffeine. If you have a headache, you take a pill. Silencing the surface alarm without addressing why it's ringing allows the underlying structural issue to grow, mutating into a more stubborn condition. To break this cycle of trial and error, we need to evaluate the body through systemic pattern recognition. Identifying the baseline state of your internal environment is the prerequisite for any protocol. Without it, you are limited to temporary relief before the old patterns return. Decoding that baseline starts with one central diagnostic question. Is your body struggling because of a surplus or a deficit? Once you know the direction of the imbalance, you ask the second question. Is the disturbance material, what we call yin, or is it functional, known as yang? Look at this framework. We map material, yin, left, and functional, yang, right, crossing excess above and deficiency below. Without it, complaints like night sweats and sluggishness form a chaotic mess. Sorting them reveals the requirements for fixing the machinery. The excess track represents a state of burden where the body struggles under an active accumulation that must be cleared. In the top left quadrant, yin excess occurs when heavy, damp, cold material accumulates and smothers your natural functional energy. Think of a heavily flooded hearth. The logs are present and the potential for heat is there, but a fire cannot ignite under the weight of stagnant water. In the body, this manifests as deep physical heaviness, slow movements, stubborn fluid retention, and a pale, swollen tongue. Treating this fatigue with rest or dense, nourishing supplements only adds more water to the flood. Clearing yin excess requires rigorous, heat-generating movement to evaporate the dampness. Moving to the top right quadrant, we find yang excess. Here, the body's functional machinery goes into severe overdrive, generating aggressive heat that attacks your natural moisture. This is a fast-moving forest fire. It is a forceful, active state that consumes available resources in its path. You see this in acute infections, severe agitation, high fevers, intense thirst, and a bright red tongue with a thick yellow coating. Stopping this fire requires aggressive, immediate cooling protocols to save the body's fluids. However, overusing those extreme cooling methods can damage your digestion once the fire is out. While both states involve too much, the intervention for draining stagnant water is dangerously different from the intervention for fighting an active fire. We now look at the deficiency track, where the body is starved of a core resource and requires slow, structural rebuilding. Yin deficiency, in the bottom left, is a depletion of the body's cooling, moistening material. Without this substance to anchor it, your functional energy spins out of control. It behaves like an antique oil lamp running dry. With barely a drop of fuel left, the wick burns with an erratic, flaring flame. Clinically, this creates empty heat, night sweats, deep restlessness, chronic insomnia, and a red tongue that is entirely stripped of its protective coating. This heat lacks real strength. Treating this like a true yang excess fire with harsh detoxes risks extinguishing that flickering flame and causing a severe relapse. Finally, in the bottom right, we have yang deficiency. This is a lack of the warming, moving force needed to power your organs, which allows cold fluids to pool up secondarily. Imagine a stone-cold iron stove. Because there is no heat underneath, the heavy pot of water resting on top simply sits undisturbed and stagnates. A person in this state experiences deep cold intolerance, exhaustion that temporarily improves with warmth, and a pale, chronically wet tongue. Pushing through this lethargy with high-intensity exercise will bankrupt whatever minor function is left. Low energy is not a single condition. Treating a cold, weak stove requires slow, sustained warming rather than the rigorous exertion used to fix a flooded hearth. We can apply this framework to specific patient profiles to determine their exact protocol. Patient A, a burned-out executive with insomnia, maps into yin deficiency. Patient B, a sluggish optimizer with lethargy, maps to yin excess. Patient C, with acute inflammation, falls into yang excess. Though all share general fatigue, their positions dictate entirely distinct interventions. Patient A must prioritize slower, restorative rebuilding and move away from high-intensity output, even if resting feels unproductive in the short term. Patient B must commit to the discomfort of strict material clearing, dietary restriction, and forced movement to break their stagnation. The most significant health mistakes occur when a lack of energy, deficiency, is confused with a blockage of energy, excess. Optimization requires matching a precise action to a systemic deficit or surplus, rather than stacking generic wellness hacks. Lasting health requires choosing protocols based on the systemic root, rather than the surface symptom.